The night arrived sooner than expected, wrapping the mountains in darkness and silence. The wind grew stronger and howled softly around the cabin walls. Snowflakes tapped against the windows, and the fire inside crackled warmly, keeping the cold away. Elias added another log to the flames, while Mara sat near the hearth, holding a cup of warm broth he had prepared for her. Her son, little Jonas, slept peacefully under the wool blanket, his cheeks finally showing a soft color instead of the pale blue shade he had earlier. Mara watched the flames quietly, her eyes reflecting the light. She looked calmer now, but Elias could still see the tiredness in her shoulders and the sadness hidden in her expression. She had not spoken much after eating. It was as if her mind was trying to understand how she had ended up in a stranger's cabin after crossing half the mountain alone. Elias sat on the wooden chair across from her. He was not a man of many words, but he believed silence could sometimes comfort more than questions. Still, he knew she carried worries, and those worries needed space to breathe. "You should rest," he said gently. "Your body needs time to recover." She nodded slowly, but did not move. "I will." After checking on Jonas again, "You don't have to worry," Elias replied. "He is warm and safe." Mara looked at her sleeping child with soft eyes. "He has been through so much. After his father died, he did not talk for days. He clings to me all the time. I fear he feels the things I don't say." Elias listened quietly. He respected how much she cared for her son. In the mountains, strength was not measured by muscle alone. Sometimes strength was the ability to keep going even when everything felt heavy. "What happened after your husband passed?" he asked softly. Mara hesitated. Her fingers tightened around the cup. She did not seem afraid to tell her story, only tired from reliving it. "My husband Samuel. He worked as a woodcutter near the valley," she began. "He was kind, and he always tried his best to support us, even when work was slow. One morning he went out to cut wood, and by evening he hadn't come home. Some men found him near the river. They said he slipped on ice. They said it was an accident." Her voice cracked softly, but she kept going. "At first I received help from a few neighbors, but soon people started whispering about debts he owed, about how I wouldn't be able to pay for the house. They told me I should leave before trouble came. Some even said I should give Jonas up to a boarding home." Eliza's jaw tightened. Not from anger at her story, though it bothered him deeply, but because he knew people could be cruel when they felt fear or greed. "And so," Mara continued, "I sold everything that was left, my pots, my husband's tools, the furniture. I used the money to buy a small bag of food and warm clothes for Jonas. Then I left. I walked for days. I hoped the settlement ahead would give us a new beginning." Elias leaned forward slightly. "You could have died out there." She gave a soft, sad smile. "I know, but standing still would have been worse. If I stayed in the valley, I would have lost the little I still had." The fire crackled again as silence settled between them. Elias respected her courage. She had crossed the mountain not out of recklessness, but because hope pushed her forward. "You're safe here," Elias said firmly. "You don't have to rush anywhere. You'll stay until you have strength and a plan." Mara looked at him with grateful eyes. "I don't know how to repay your kindness." Elias shook his head. "Helping someone in need isn't something you repay. It's something you pass forward when the time comes." She took a slow breath, touched by the sincerity in his tone. She placed her empty cup on the table and adjusted the blanket around Jonas. "Will he be all right tonight?" she asked. "He will be better than all right," Elias replied. "He has warmth, shelter, and rest. Nothing threatens him here." Tears formed in her eyes suddenly. Not tears of fear, but the kind that appear when someone finally feels safe after a long time. She quickly wiped them away, embarrassed. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I didn't mean to cry." Elias shook his head again. "There is nothing to be sorry for." He stood up and moved toward the small storage area beside the cabin wall. From there, he brought out a thick wool blanket and handed it to her. "You can sleep on the bed tonight," he said. "I'll sleep near the fire." Mara's eyes widened. "But that's your bed. I can't take it from you." "You aren't taking anything?" "You're a guest." and guests sleep in the warmest place. His tone was calm, but it carried a gentle honesty that left no room for argument. Mara finally nodded. Double quotes, thank you. Elias prepared a simple sleeping spot for himself near the fire, using furs and blankets. Mara lifted Jonas carefully and laid him on the bed. She tucked him in and brushed his hair gently with her fingers. Then she sat on the edge of the bed, watching him breathe, for a long time. The only sounds in the cabin were the fire popping and the wind outside. Slowly, Mara lay down beside her son and closed her eyes, exhaustion finally winning. Elias watched from his place near the fire. He noticed how peaceful she looked when she slept. The worry lines on her forehead faded. Her breathing was soft and steady. He felt a quiet satisfaction knowing she was finally safe. He had lived in the mountains long enough to value moments like this, moments when he could protect someone without needing praise or reward. Hours passed. The storm outside grew louder, but the cabin stayed strong. Snow piled against the windows, and ice formed along the roof. But inside, the fire kept the air warm. At some point during the night, Jonas stirred. He woke up silently, rubbing his eyes. When he saw Elias sitting near the fire, he froze for a moment. He had not seen the mountain man clearly before. Elias smiled gently. Hello, little one. Jonas blinked, studying him cautiously from the bed. Your mother is sleeping, Elias said softly. You're safe here. Jonas hesitated, then nodded slowly. He didn't speak, but he crawled closer to his mother and tucked himself under her arm. Elias watched quietly. He did not push the boy to talk. Children spoke when their hearts felt ready. Morning came with softer light. The storm had passed, leaving thick snow everywhere. Mara woke first, confused for a moment, before remembering where she was. She sat up slowly, checking Jonas was still asleep beside her. Elias was already awake, sitting at the table, sharpening a knife. Not for danger, but for morning tasks, cutting wood, preparing food, and beginning the day. He looked up when he heard her move. Good morning, he said. Good morning, she replied softly. Thank you for everything. Elias put the knife down and stood. Are you hungry? She nodded. Yes. But I don't want to use your supplies. I have enough, he answered simply. A mountain man always keeps more than he needs. He made porridge with dried fruits and a bit of honey. Mara ate slowly, appreciating the warm food. Jonas woke soon after and joined her, though he remained quiet. Elias noticed the boy's eyes were less fearful now. After breakfast, Elias put on his coat and boots. I'm going outside to clear the snow, he said. You stay in the cabin where it's warm. Mara nodded, but before he went out, she stepped closer. Elias, she said softly, if there is anything I can do to help, please tell me. I don't want to be someone who sits doing nothing. He studied her for a moment. She seemed stronger today, though still tired. You can help by resting, he said with a calm smile. That's the first step. But Mara shook her head gently. I want to work. I want to feel useful again. Elias respected her determination. Then keep the fire strong, he said, and watch Jonas. Later, if you feel better, you can help with smaller chores. She smiled gratefully. Thank you. Elias stepped outside, leaving her in the warm cabin. As she tended the fire and folded the blankets, she felt something new growing inside her, something she had not felt since her husband died. Stability, hope, the sense of having a place to breathe again. And as the morning passed, she realized that maybe, just maybe, the mountains had not been the end of her journey. They might be the beginning. The winter sun was weak that morning, hanging low above the tall pine trees that covered the mountains. The cold air moved slowly through the valley, carrying the smell of fresh snow. Life in those mountains was never easy, but people who lived there understood the land and learned how to survive its long winters and lonely days. Among them was a man known simply as Elias Boone, a mountain man who lived far from towns, far from noise, and far from trouble. He was tall, strong, and quiet, with a beard that touched his chest and eyes that noticed everything. believed he preferred the company of forests, storms, and rivers more than he liked human voices. That morning, Elias walked down a narrow path with his axe on his shoulder. He was going to check his traps near the frozen creek. His steps were slow but steady, leaving deep marks in the snow. He did not expect to meet anyone on that path. People rarely traveled into those mountains during winter, and the nearest settlement was miles away. But just as he reached the bend in the trail, he heard something unusual: soft footsteps, uneven, almost like someone was struggling. He stopped, listened, and turned his head toward the sound. The forest was usually quiet at that hour, only wind and small animals moving in the distance. But this sound was different. It was human. Elias tightened his grip on his axe, not out of fear, but out of instinct. Trouble sometimes came from desperate travelers. After a moment, he moved toward the sound. What he saw froze him in place. A young woman was walking slowly through the snow, holding a small bundle close to her chest. Her face was pale, her lips trembling from the cold, and her steps looked like they might fail at any moment. Her clothes were simple and worn out, not meant for mountain winter. Snowflakes clung to her hair and shoulders. The bundle she carried was wrapped with thin cloths, and Elias soon realized it was a child, a little boy, no more than 3 years old, sleeping against her shoulder. The woman did not notice Elias until she almost walked into him. When she finally lifted her head, her eyes were full of fear and exhaustion. She looked like someone who had walked far beyond her strength. For a moment, she tried to step back, unsure of whether he was friend or danger. But her foot slipped on the icy ground, and Elias acted quickly, steadying her before she fell. His hands were warm despite the cold, and the woman looked at him with a mixture of fear and fragile hope. "What are you doing here?" Elias asked gently. His voice was deep but calm, the kind that carried strength without threat. The woman took a slow breath before answering. My name is Mara," she whispered. "My husband. He passed away last month. We lived near the valley, but after he died, everything changed. I had nowhere to go. I heard there was a small settlement in this direction. I thought maybe someone would help." Elias looked over her shoulder at the thick forest behind her. The path she had taken was dangerous even for experienced travelers. He wondered how she had survived the night in such weather. "Where did you sleep last night?" he asked. She looked down shamefully, under a fallen tree. "I had no firewood. I kept my son close, so he wouldn't freeze." Elias took a deep breath, feeling the weight of her situation. Winter in the mountains was unforgiving, and even strong men struggled during storms. She had come with a child. She must have been desperate or incredibly brave. Mara continued speaking, her voice shaking. "I tried to keep walking this morning, but I feel weak. I haven't eaten since yesterday. My boy hasn't eaten either." As she spoke, her knees wobbled again. Elias quickly reached out and supported her. He didn't usually invite strangers into his life, but he could not leave her and the child in the snow. His heart was not made of stone. "You cannot walk any farther today," he said firmly. "You won't survive another night outside. Come. My cabin is not far. I'll give you food, warmth, and safety." Mara's eyes widened slightly at the word safety, as if she had not heard it in a long time. She hesitated only a moment, maybe fearing she would become a burden or unwelcome guest. But Elias saw the way her hands trembled. She didn't have enough strength left to argue. He gently lifted the child from her arms. The boy continued sleeping, his tiny hands curled near his chin. Elias cradled him carefully, as if he had done this many times before. Mara looked relieved and frightened, at the same time relieved that someone strong enough could help. Frightened because she had no other choice. "Follow me," Elias said softly. The walk to his cabin took 10 minutes. Mara stumbled a few times, but Elias slowed his pace so she could keep up. He kept glancing back at her, making sure she was still standing. The trail grew steeper, but soon the small log cabin came into view, a sturdy structure built with thick logs, smoke rising from the chimney. When they reached the front door, Elias pushed it open and stepped inside. The cabin was warm, lit by a fire that burned steadily in the stone hearth. There were shelves filled with jars of dried berries, flour, herbs, and smoked meat. A wooden tables stood in the center of the room, and a thick fur rug lay near the fire. Mara stopped at the threshold, staring at the warmth as if it was something from a forgotten dream. "Come in," Elias said again, his voice kinder now. "You're safe here." Mara stepped inside slowly, holding her arms around herself. Her body was shaking from fatigue. She looked like she might collapse at any moment. Elias placed the sleeping boy on the fur rug near the fire, covering him with a thick wool blanket. Then he moved to the shelf, took a pot, filled it with water, and set it on the fire. He placed a small plate of dried berries and bread on the table. "Sit," he told her. She sat down carefully, almost too weak to lift the bread properly. When she finally took a bite, her eyes closed for a moment. As if eating warm food after so long brought her back to life, Elias watched her silently. He did not ask too many questions, not yet. He could see she was exhausted and frightened, but also determined. People who survived such journeys were often stronger than they looked. After she finished her first bites, he spoke again. "You and your child will stay here for now. The storm coming tonight is strong. You cannot travel in this weather, Mara. Look down." "I don't want to cause trouble for you. I know you live alone. I should not disturb your life." Elias shook his head. "This mountain is harsh. People survive only when they help one another. I'm not sending you back into the snow." Her eyes softened with quiet gratitude. "Thank you," she whispered. "Most people turned away when my husband died. They thought I would bring misfortune. They said I should leave." Elias felt a hard knot of anger twist inside him, not at her, but at the cruel world that often pushed the weak aside. He looked at her with steady eyes and said with quiet strength, "Listen, Mara, as long as you are under my roof, no one will harm you. You and your son are safe here. Think of nothing else today." Her eyes filled, not with fear this time, but with the overwhelming relief of someone who had carried too much weight for too long. Elias added one more sentence slowly, firmly, like a promise carved into stone. "Your safety is my responsibility until you stand strong again." For the first time since her journey began, Mara allowed herself to breathe deeply. And in that warm cabin, the days passed slowly, but with purpose. The snow on the mountains began to soften under the weak winter sun, revealing patches of earth, frozen streams, and hidden rocks. The air was still crisp, but it carried a promise that spring was approaching. Inside the cabin, life had found a new rhythm. Mara woke each morning to tend the fire, prepare food for her son, and assist Elias with small chores. The simple routine brought a sense of comfort she had not felt in months. And Jonas began to smile more, small laughter echoing softly through the wooden cabin walls. Elias observed her quietly. He did not interfere much, for he believed people grew stronger when they were allowed to discover their own strength. But he also made sure Mara and Jonas were safe, providing guidance when needed. He taught Mara how to chop wood carefully, how to carry water from the frozen creek without spilling, and how to store food so it would last through the changing days. Mara listened closely, absorbing his advice, determination shining brighter with each passing day. One morning, Elise noticed Mara watching Jonas as he tried to slide down a small slope near the cabin. The boy had grown bolder, using a piece of smooth bark as a makeshift sled. Mara's eyes were full of concern, but a small smile tugged at her lips. Elias watched too, silently judging the slope, making sure it was safe. When Jonas finally tumbled gently into a patch of snow, laughing, Mara rushed to him and scooped him up. Her laughter mingled with his, a sound that warmed the cabin more than any fire could. "Careful, little one," she said, brushing snow from his hair. "But I'm glad you're happy." Elias approached, leaning on his axe. "He is learning," he said simply. "Children grow fast here. The mountains teach them quickly." Mara nodded, her eyes reflecting gratitude. "And he is lucky to have you," she added quietly. Elias's gaze softened. "No one grows alone. Not you, not him, not me. The mountains remind us of that every day." Days turned into weeks. Snow melted in patches, revealing the first green shoots of wildflowers and herbs. The air carried a faint scent of earth and life, and the sun felt warmer. Mara began to explore small areas near the cabin, gathering firewood, collecting water, and helping with Elias's tasks. With each step, she felt a growing sense of independence. The fear and despair that had weighed her down seemed to drift away like clouds pushed by the mountain wind. One afternoon, while Mara collected fresh herbs along the creek, she noticed Elias moving cautiously over the rocks to repair a small section of the cabin roof that had been damaged during the winter storm. She called out softly to him. "Do you need help?" she asked. Elias glanced at her and shook his head. "It is easier for me to do it alone," he replied. "The roof is high, and it is better I handle it. But thank you for offering." Mara watched him work. The strength in his movements, the care he took with each plank and nail, reminded her why she had felt safe with him from the moment she arrived. She realized that his protection was not just physical, it was also in the quiet, consistent way he ensured she and Jonas could survive and grow stronger. His patience, knowledge, and calm presence had become her anchor in this new life. Evenings became moments of storytelling. After dinner, Elias would sit near the fire, Jonas on his lap, and Mara beside him, listening. He spoke of the mountains, the forest animals, and the changing seasons. He told tales of survival, of small victories, of moments when patience and understanding made all the difference. Mara listened intently, sometimes laughing at the boy's antics, sometimes nodding thoughtfully. She began to feel part of this land, not as an intruder, but as someone welcomed and valued. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the mountains, casting long shadows across the valley, Mara spoke softly. "Elias, I feel like I can breathe again. I never thought I'd feel this way after everything that happened." Elias looked at her, his expression calm but thoughtful. "It is not the mountains that give you life back," he said. "It is your courage, your choice to keep moving forward, your determination to survive and protect your son. The mountains only provide a place for that courage to grow." Mara smiled faintly, realizing the truth in his words. She had survived because she refused to give up. She had found a guide in Elias who did not pity her, but respected her strength. She felt a quiet bond forming between them, built on trust, respect, and shared purpose. The bond was tested one morning when Jonas fell ill. A fever had taken hold, and the boy lay curled under blankets, shivering despite the warmth of the cabin. Mara panicked for a moment, unsure of what to do. Elias stepped forward calmly, examining the child and preparing a simple herbal mixture he had learned from years in the mountains. "You are doing fine," Leah said gently to Mara. "Stay calm. Fear will not help him. We will care for him together." Mara watched as he worked, admiring his skill and calmness. She followed his instructions carefully, applying warmth, administering small doses of the herbal mixture and ensuring Jonas stayed hydrated. Hours passed. Slowly, the fever began to break. By evening, Jonas was resting peacefully, his breathing steady. Mara felt an overwhelming sense of relief. Mixed with gratitude for Elise's guidance, "You saved him," she whispered, tears in her eyes. "No," Elias said softly. "We saved him together." That night, Mara sat near the fire, Jonas asleep beside her. Elias watched quietly, his eyes reflecting the flickering flames. The mountain was no longer just a harsh, unforgiving place. It had become a home, a place of safety, growth, and resilience. As weeks passed, Mara's confidence grew. She began to prepare small meals on her own, chop wood, and even mend clothes. She and Elias developed a rhythm of cooperation. Jonas thrived under their care, his laughter filling the cabin and echoing through the surrounding forest. The bond between the three became stronger, built not on obligation, but on trust, shared experience, and quiet respect. One afternoon, Mara ventured further along the creek. She discovered a patch of wildflowers blooming early in the spring sun. Kneeling, she picked a few carefully, arranging them in a small cup she carried back to the cabin. When Elias saw them, he smiled. "They are beautiful," he said. Like hope in the mountains, Mara placed them on the table near the fire. She realized that the cabin was no longer just a shelter. It was a home filled with warmth, laughter, and life. Elias spent his days maintaining the cabin and teaching Mara more about mountain survival. He taught her to read the weather in the clouds, track animal trails, and store food for the changing seasons. Mara absorbed everything eagerly, proud of her growing knowledge and capability. One evening, as they sat together after dinner, Elias spoke. "Mara, the mountains are harsh, but they also show us what matters most: strength, patience, and respect for life. You have learned well, and Jonas too. You both have grown stronger." Mara looked at him, feeling a sense of peace she had not known for a long time. "I never thought I could find this in the mountains," she said softly. "A place to heal, a place to belong, a place to feel safe." Elias nodded. "You belong here, with your son. And you have proven that you can survive anything the world sends your way." As the sun set behind the mountains, casting golden light into the cabin, Mara felt hope blossom in her heart. The fear and despair that had followed her from the valley were gone, replaced by courage, resilience, and the quiet joy of a life rebuilt. She knew that challenges would come again, as they always did in the mountains. But now she had learned that with patience, care, and determination, she and her son could face whatever came. In the evenings, as Jonas fell asleep beside her, Mara would glance at Elias and feel gratitude beyond words. He had not only provided shelter and safety, but he had also given her confidence, guidance, and respect. And in return, she had given him something to a bond of trust, care, and shared responsibility. The mountains no longer seemed lonely or harsh. They were full of life, growth, and possibility. Mara knew that she could face the future, not as a widow without hope, but as a mother strong enough to protect her child, a woman capable of rebuilding her life, and a human being who had found friendship and guidance in the most unexpected place. The snow melted slowly. Streams grew louder, and the forest began to awaken. The cabin, once a simple shelter, became a home filled with warmth, laughter, and the quiet certainty that life could begin again, even after the deepest hardship. And as the days turned into weeks, Mara, Jonas, and Elias faced the future together, stronger, wiser, and ready for whatever the mountains and life might bring next. The mountain had tested them all, but they had survived and grown, and in that survival, they had found something far greater than shelter. They had found home, hope, and the unspoken promise of a new beginning.